Well, hello, my friends. We meet again. It has been a while. Where should we begin? Today, we take a look at Creed's almighty anthem, One Last Breath, or as what a lot of my other normie friends like to call the song, 6 Feet from the Edge. In the last few years or so, we have seen a really strange, although not that strange when you think about it, renaissance of Creed and Creed's music. And rather than being caused from an older crowd who would have been in their 20s and 30s when the song came out 20 years ago, it is almost exclusively through people my age or younger discovering, or I guess you could say rediscovering it.
But I'm down to one last breath. You everything. We're on what we created. We're on what.
No. No, man.
Zoomers and millennials, it seems, have really taken to the song and adopted it into our own musical zeitgeist. So today, let us try to find out just why the song speaks to so many people. We will take a look at the construction of the song, the structure, some of the music theory, the production, and of course the lyrics to try to deduce just what about this song is it exactly which causes it to resonate so deeply and profoundly with the people of the mid-2020s here. And you know, maybe we're all just 6 feet from the edge, who knows? This is the One Last Breath deep dive. Now, I was about 7 years old when this song came out. I do not really remember hearing this specific song, One Last Breath, on the radio, but I do remember hearing some of the other Creed mega hits back then. You know, Higher, My Sacrifice, With Arms Wide Open, all these songs I would hear all the time on the radio, echoing in and out department stores, and I'm sure many people share this collective experience as well. This is the sort of great thing about these old sort of radio hits, is that, you know, everybody is familiar with these songs, right? So it is a bit perplexing as to why One Last Breath has nearly double the streams that their #1 hit single With Arms Wide Open has, which, to be honest, it is quite strange, as One Last Breath charted nearly the same as My Sacrifice, yet I legit never remembered hearing this song until the 2020s. Or maybe this was just a Canadian thing, so to my American and European friends, you know, let me know down in the comments if you remember this track, because I don't, but I do remember those other Creed mega hits. And while you're at it, why not leave a like? It really helps out myself and the channel grow, as well as perhaps consider becoming a channel member and supporting me that way. Cheers, boys. I appreciate you all. Trying to hit 20,000 subscribers too. You know what to do. So essentially, there is something very, very special about the song One Last Breath, which has caused it to resonate so deeply with the people today, which has caused it to become Creed's biggest song. And yet my whole point here is that the band itself, Creed, is absolutely drenched in this early 2000s nostalgia. In fact, I made a whole video about it, which you should go check out after this one. So even for me, who didn't hear this song up until about 4 years ago, the song still feels like the early 2000s. You know, Creed's whole sort of musical aesthetics, I guess you could say, is very early 2000s. And however, even back in the early noughties, I remember hearing the grumblings of Creed slander. This was, of course, the era of that Gen X cultural dominance, and their motto was, you know, ironic detachment and emotional apathy. And I don't really have the time to dive deep into this topic today, but you should check out the channel Acculturation. He really does a great job at parsing out these sort of weird cultural zeitgeists, but essentially in the mid-2000s, authentic displays of positive emotions or spirituality, especially in the post-grunge or butt rock era, was to be relentlessly mocked. It was a relic of the turn of the millennium, and as we moved further and further into the late noughties and early 2010s, and further into this post-ironic sort of detachment culture, Creed was relegated to the poster boys of cultural cringe. Yet, something happened as we moved into the 2020s. Perhaps we all became tired of this post-ironic emotional detachment. Perhaps the Gen X cultural dominance became cringe. After all, it seems that whatever the older generations did and liked, the younger ones tend to do the opposite, or take a fresh, sort of unbiased look at some of the things that were in the past. And thus, Gen Z and millennials embraced with arms wide open the very clear authenticity and emotional vulnerability of Creed's music. There is no ironic turn of phrase, nor is there any disingenuous swerves or twists. What you hear is what you get with Creed, and honestly, I think a lot of people, including myself, really find incredible joy in just something so authentic. You know, it wears its heart on its sleeve. It's not trying to be anything else, right? In a world full of inauthentic experiences and too deep for you experimental music, Creed just fucking rocks. That's it. It just rocks. End of story. And thus, as the 2020s came and lots of people were forced to stay in, a lot of people, including myself, rediscovered Creed and all the amazingly powerful and moving music they made. And the song which really seems to resonate deeply with society today is the almighty One Last Breath. I mean, just the amount of memes this year that I have seen featuring the song is quite impressive. It's immense.
Baby 60, it is so fun.
The song really seems to represent feelings of both a paradise lost, as well as a sort of return to a more simplistic and authentic existence. Yet, I also think that Creed, and especially this song, really sort of represent a collective consciousness which is screaming out in pain and agony. It feels like as a society, we are just 6 feet from the edge, and maybe 6 feet isn't all that far down. And the climaxes and dynamics of the song really represent this sort of frayed ends of sanity very well, this sort of frayed end and desperate feeling of this current zeitgeist, right? And of course, this relates deeply to the individual, with a lot of the memes with the song revolving around situations in which one finds himself on the brink of an emotional breakdown. Usually it was some small thing going wrong, being the sort of final straw, breaking the camel's back sort of thing, right?
Let me see. Hold me now. Hold me now. Hold me now.
It's an incredibly profound feeling to put into music, but somehow Creed managed to do it. Now, I will get back to all this later on, but keep it all in mind as we dissect the song. We will go through the music first, then along with the lyrics, we will decipher the story being told, and then relate it all back to what I just said here. So, let us begin. So essentially, the song is all about contrasts and climaxes. Here I've mapped out the song in terms of intensity. You can see that despite it being just a little bit shy of 4 minutes long, the song develops and progresses very naturally and in a way that makes a lot of sense, leading to several climaxes which encourage us, the listeners, to scream out loud with Scott Stapp. So the song starts off very humbly with just a lone electric guitar on a clean channel. The guitarist for Creed, Mark Tremonti, is one of the all-time best at creating these very memorable and catchy guitar parts, and the intro riff here is, no exception. It's a very gentle sounding guitar with just the smallest bit of reverb and delay on it. It feels very delicate, and you have to give Mark tremendous props for this beautiful finger-picked intro. He just plays it very beautifully. It's just great. The song is played at a moderate pace of around 125 beats per minute, and I think this is the first song that I have done on this channel which is predominantly in a major key, D major to be exact. I have a whole playlist of these other deep dives if you want to check out any of the others out, but do that after this video. Watch time's important. Now, upon further inspection of this clean guitar intro, it becomes clear to me that this is a very regal and almost baroque sounding progression. Here, let me put the whole thing on a piano roll and replace the electric guitar with a harpsichord so you can hear what I mean. Really, it sounds like something maybe Mozart would have written. The contour of the melody, which is the shape and trajectory of the notes, sounds like peaks and valleys, ups and downs, highs and lows, Or even when I put the melody into a different sound, it almost sounds like a relaxation song, like the waves of the ocean are crashing upon the shores of life. I know that's a stretch, but bear with me here. It is just a very, very gorgeous intro, melody, riff, whatever you want to call it here. And this is why. It follows the circle of fifths very closely to produce this great and iconic opening riff. Essentially, the arpeggios that he plays here go from D major to A major, which is right next to it on the circle of fifths, then to B minor, and then finally to G major, which as you can see here are all right next to each other on the circle, which makes it such a pleasing sound. Or we can call this a major 1 to major 5 to minor 6 to major 4 progression. Now, of course, he does not play all these as straight up minor and major chords. Mark Tremonti gives us lots of these little fantastic trills and moments of suspended notes throughout the part, which give the section a lot of life and character. But I think my favorite bit has to be the two end chords, which wrap this progression up. He moves away from the more up and down fingerpick style of playing and instead plays these last two chords on straight up and down arpeggios. The B minor add 9 chord in particular is just truly gorgeous and really gives the end of this progression a lot of tension, which is then resolved perfectly by the following G major arpeggio. It gives this half-step tension to it with that D and C sharp note rubbing against each other. Insanely gorgeous, and we will see this sort of repeated use of the D and C sharp rubbing against each other very often in this song. Now, to me, musically, this sort of represents the thin line of sanity and serenity in which most people find themselves in. You know, things are okay for the most part, there's some ups and downs, but despite the beauty and delicate nature of the guitar riff, there's some underlying tension and darkness just below the surface. Really, really, really great stuff, and one of my favorite intros of all time, honestly. Now, as the intro guitar riff wraps up and it enters its first repetition, we are joined by the beautiful voice of Scott Stapp. Now, Scott Stapp has widely been criticized and mocked for his yarling singing, equating him simply to an Eddie Vedder or Scott Weiland ripoff. Yet honestly, I just think this is just simply untrue. To me, Scott Stapp's voice has a very, very distinct and unique character to it. It's soft and vulnerable, yet other times it is full of power and vengeance. And honestly, I think now in 2024, the Jarl is most closely associated with Scott Stapp, so who won in the end, I guess. And the comment left on the video for One Last Breath really sums up his voice very nicely. And like, I'm not trying to completely glaze Scott Stapp or anything like that. You know, I don't really think he was actually channeling God through his voice. Rather, his voice seems to be speaking from a level much deeper than the place normal lyrics come from.
Please come now, I think I'm falling, holding on to what I think.
Scott Stapp on this song in particular really seems to have tapped into a very deep underlying spiritual pain. The spiritual pain which I'm sure most people here watching this video can attest to. And his voice really seems to bring this forth, especially when combined with that very beautiful and serene opening guitar riff. And here in this opening verse, Scott's voice is also very vulnerable, sounding like he's pleading with the universe for some sort of salvation, but his voice simply echoes out into nothing along with Mark's guitar.
All I think is safe. It seems I found the road to nowhere.
It's really a very human performance with Scott sliding in and out of notes. And the best way I can put it, yeah, it's just very vulnerable and emotional. Yeah, it's just great. He sings very beautifully too, and I love his voice. It just sounds great. Here in this opening verse, he sings, "Please come now, I think I'm falling. I'm holding on to all I think is safe. It seems I found the road to nowhere, and I'm trying to escape. I yelled back when I heard thunder, but I'm down to one last breath. And with it, let me say, hold me now. I'm 6 feet from the edge and I'm thinking. The production on his voice is very important to the song as well. A single solitary voice, no double tracking, and his voice is very dry sounding. Hardly any noticeable reverb or delay, which matches Mark's guitar sound and places them both into the same space, you know, both sonically and emotionally.
I am back when I heard thunder, but I'm down to one last.
There's only one instance of extra production here, which is the line, quote, "I yelled back when I heard thunder," end quote, which also, interestingly enough, comes on the only minor chord used here in this progression. Nice little tie-in there musically with the chords and with the lyrics. As he sings thunder, we get a lone echo of thunder in the background, which adds to this sort of incoming storm feeling that these lyrics have. Like, it sort of gives you this indication that there's something big coming, right? It's sort of just this one word sort of echoes back. It's a cool production choice there. Another interesting thing about his singing here is this use of the C sharp note, which would be the 7th in the D major scale. He comes back to this note often, and especially on the D major chord, this really rubs right against these D notes that the guitar is playing, creating some really gorgeous and somewhat tense sounding vocal lines, which of course adds all to the effect of the song. Here, I put them all on piano together, the guitar and the voice, so you can really hear how they create this beautiful melding of sounds at intervals. It's great. It's very tense, yet beautiful. As they finish up this first verse, the band moves into what will eventually become the grand and huge chorus. Yet, the first time they play the chorus here, it is very subdued and small and humble. Scott Stapp almost sounds defeated and dejected, like he is really on his one last breath.
Hold me now. I'm 6 feet from the edge and I'm thinking.
And here in this first chorus, Scott Stapp sings these absolutely iconic and extremely memorable and relatable lyrics. And he sings them in a very vulnerable way that almost encourages you to sing with him. You know, it sounds like he's on his last breath, and you can really sort of relate to that, I feel. Quote, "Hold me now, I'm 6 feet from the edge and I'm thinking, maybe 6 feet ain't so far down," end quote. He's 6 feet from the edge and 6 feet down. So 6 feet down obviously represents the grave, right? You go 6 feet under, and he's standing 6 feet away from his grave.
Maybe 6 feet is so far down.
It's a very interesting line. It's like, I'm getting close to just wanting to be in the grave, right? Maybe 6 feet isn't so far down, right? Hold me now, I'm 6 feet from the edge. It's right. It's like I'm on my last leg. I'm on my last straw. Like, things are just grinding me into dust, and this is the last thing I have, right? I'm down to one last breath. I really think that's great lyricism here, and a line that many people can relate to and can be applied into many different points in one's life. Really great stuff. Yet as the chorus continues and the guitar repeats, we get these beautiful violins entering the picture. This violin represents a lifeline, you know, something to keep him going.
Again, maybe 6 feet is so far down.
It is a really small but very profound and important production choice here, and I absolutely love it. The chords are similar to what was played in the intro, but with an important distinction. Rather than going from D major to A major like they did in the verse, they go from D major to F sharp major. Now, F sharp major does not exist in the key of D major, so this is an example of borrowing from a parallel key. Instead of playing the F sharp minor chord, which is the 3 chord which would exist in D major, instead they just simply play F sharp major. And this borrowed chord gives the chorus a very strong and direct feel. It does not even feel like an out of key chord, but it gives just enough melodic contrast and interest to make the chorus very engaging. It's a very grand and distinct sound, those two movements from D major to F sharp major. In addition, Mark Tremonti plays the open B and E strings as well on this chord, which gives us a very tense and dissonant sounding F sharp major 11 chord, with that B and C sharp note rubbing right against each other. Again, another great strategic use of dissonance here. The dissonance, though, is all resolved when the band once again plays that B minor to G major chord to end the pattern.
Maybe 6 feet is so far down.
But on the repeat here, the added violin sort of plays a very odd and strange melody. Here, listen to it. On these chords, the violin really dwells on and accentuates that out-of-scale A-sharp note, and notably does not really resolve itself at all, which gives this section a lot of tension and character, which is eventually all restored as Scott Stapp mournfully croons out the last line of the chorus. Really, really great, and a very tonally interesting chorus. The violin lifeline not resolving is sort of symbolic as well, representing a story which is not yet over. And now, at almost a full minute into the song, we finally get the appearance of the drums and the bass. They both enter in and give the song some much needed energy and momentum, which keeps the song interesting and stops it from getting tedious. The drums and bass sort of give us this relief of, oh, okay, the song is finally started. You know, you could sort of think of this as maybe the intro and the verse was someone at night really like dealing and pleading with it, right? And then the drums and bass come in. It's almost like morning has come, right? The sunrise. That's sort of what it feels like too with the violin. It sort of feels like a sunrise. It's great. Really, really, it's just beautiful. I love the part after the first chorus. The bass, which is also played by Mark Tremonti on this record, does some cool slides here and just generally gives the song a much, much warmer feel from the rather austere intro section. And as this section repeats, we get another appearance of the violin. Although this time that out-of-key A-sharp note is entirely omitted and the melody resolves itself back onto the root note of D. It's just another interesting storytelling element added to the song and a motif that will reappear again later.
I'm looking down, now that it's over, reflecting on all.
As the second verse rolls around, it is performed very much the same as the intro verse, although this time, of course, with the drums and bass. And these rhythm elements really breathe some life into the verse and give it a much different feel. It seems like time is moving on, right? Rather than the lone and almost desperate sounding intro, this verse feels very contemplative and pensive, like a person thinking back upon their life and how they got to this point.
Reflecting on all of my mistakes. I thought I found the road.
Here Stapp sings, "I'm looking down now that it's over, reflecting on all of my mistakes. I thought I found the road to somewhere in his grace. I cried out, heaven save me, but I'm down to one last breath. And with it, let me say. Once again, we get an echo effect on the line, heaven save me, which really hammers home the desperation in that line. Desperate for something to save him, he's down to his one last breath.
I cried out, heaven save me, but I'm down.
We get a mention of in his grace here, which to me, as a person who was raised in relatively agnostic Canada, was very Christian sounding. However, if you really stop to think about it, personifying a force is something even atheistic people do, for example, Mother Nature. So really, I think for any of you edgy atheists out there, you can safely enjoy this and just think of his grace as the universal life force. Prana, chi, the universe, whatever you want to call it. And really, this verse just primes the listener for the climax to come. We get a reflection on past mistakes, a cry out to the universe for help or some sort of direction, and then, of course, a complete humbling of oneself, right? He is down to one last breath. That is the essence here, to be so down bad, to be so beaten down by life and circumstance, that the only thing you have left is your last breath. Really, really great and powerful lyrics here. It gives me goosebumps every time. And when you stop to think about it too, right? He cries out, heaven save me, but he's down to one last breath, right? That's the last thing he gives out, right? His last breath, he cries out. And with his last breath, he says, let me say. And then that moves on into the chorus, right?
Let me say, hold me.
Very, very interesting, right? You're on, again, this sort of feeling of being close to breaking, being close to the end, being close to snapping. You know, this sort of chronic stress, I guess you could say, has been building and building and building. And as he looks back on all his mistakes, right, it just gets to him, right? And that's what really sort of builds up into the climax. So not only does the music sort of build up into the climax, but the lyrics also build up into that climactic chorus as well. Really, really great stuff. And like I said, man, like it just gives me goosebumps every time. I love it. Another really cool touch to the song in the verse here is the distorted chokes combined with the drum fill, which leads us right into that grand chorus. I love it. It's like they kind of just stole the idea from Radiohead's Creep. You know, great stuff. You know, everyone loves that part in Creep, right? So why not use it on Creed's music? Great stuff. And it really leads us great into the first climax of the song, especially that drum fill too. It just sort of falls into it.
Let me say, hold me now.
Now, essentially, this second chorus here is the same as the first chorus, but with a huge wall of distorted guitars. It really just strikes you as awe-inspiring. I have not mentioned the video to the song yet, as I don't really try to, as a lot of the songs that I mentioned don't have videos. But despite its early 2000s cheese, I think it does a really great job of showing visually how this chorus feels.
Hold me now. I'm 6 feet from
Really just excellent stuff. You know, the whole song up until this point just builds and builds. A full minute and 45 seconds to get that sweet, sweet payoff. And boy, is it ever sweet when that chorus hits, right? Hold me now, right? Everybody just sings, but everybody gets up. It's great.
I'm 6 feet from the edge, and I'm thinking maybe 6.
And Scott Stapp bellows out the chorus, and in his voice, you can really hear all the agony, sadness, grief, despair, rage, and disbelief in his voice. I was talking earlier about how the song really defines this profound feeling of being on the edge and having something small happen which causes you to just snap. You know, we've all been there, right? Life isn't going great for you, and maybe you stub your toe, or maybe you misplace your keys, or maybe you snap that last bolt in the car you need to get in the work in the morning, and you just lose it and snap. And really, this is why the song speaks to so many people. This cathartic release of chronic stress while you sing your heart out with Scott Stapp to your steering wheel.
Maybe 60 ain't so far down.
It is just a fantastic chorus with all its climax of emotions, which makes the song feel so timeless yet relevant. Really, really, truly excellent stuff here, and just a masterclass in songwriting and building tension and anticipation here as well. Really, really great stuff.
Hold me now. I'm 6 feet from the edge.
Scott Stapp's vocals here are also very, very impressive. His natural baritone voice is stretched to its breaking point by hitting a B5, which is a very, very high note for baritone to hit on the line "I'm 6 feet from the edge." His voice is full of gravel and grit, and by singing the entire chorus an octave up from the way we first heard it, it really just ramps up the emotions and intensity of the song to a maximum level. Utterly fantastic singing here from Scott Stapp, and they doubled his voice too to really sort of thicken it up and add to that emotional intensity.
And then I'm thinking maybe 60 ain't so far.
Now, Mark Tremonti plays this riff in power chords, so only the root and fifths, no thirds to speak of here. This has two effects, one which makes it sound much more rock and roll, but also makes that F sharp chord sound much, much less out of place. Instead of an F sharp major chord, we just get an F sharp 5, which is entirely in key. There's no out of key note here at all. So by letting all this emotion and screaming out of the top of your lungs, you know, it makes things better. There's less dissonance. Everything is in key and everything is in its place, so to speak. Like, letting out of these emotions is very cathartic and sort of heals you in a way you could think about it. I know that's a little bit of a stretch, but I think it works, right? And before moving into the bridge, we get a couple repeats of the last line of the chorus with the instrumentals.
I'm so far down.
Stapp repeats and really hammers home this line, "I'm so far down," which really hammers home the sort of desperate, pleading tone of the song, right? He is so down bad. I'm so far down. Which, come to think of it, if I were to place a word for the current cultural zeitgeist, I would use the word desperate. That would be the first word I would use to describe the current underlying psychic collective conscious feeling, right? Desperate. That's what I would use here. And that's sort of what the song feels too. It sort of feels very desperate. And as the chorus wraps up, we are taken to the third different part of the song. So really the last 2.5 minutes were made up of only 2 sections, which get repeated and subtly changed in vibe and instrumentation. So when we move into the bridge, it sounds very distinct and stands out from the rest of the song, as well as it gives a great shift, right? It's just something new. You can't play the same 2 parts really for 4 minutes unless you're Stardust, but here they give us a nice little interesting bridge to add to this, right? Very rock and roll. No solo though, interestingly enough. In the bridge, we get a brand new chord progression, which is very powerful and majestic. To me, really, this whole part sounds like it was just lifted straight from a gospel song in the best way possible. Here, Mark Tremonti starts out by playing an E major chord. We can look at this as borrowing once again from a parallel key, as in D major, this 2 chord is minor, which we saw once before in the first chorus. It's interesting, we could see this as a key change into E major, but right after the song goes right back into a D major feeling on that D5. So really, this E major chord is maybe supposed to represent some sort of spiritual salvation, which I think is really represented well in the lyrics, right? Instead of a minor chord, it's that major chord, right? It feels very triumphant and happy, but I'll get to the chord progression a little bit later, but then after that, it goes right back into the D major feel. Scott sings, "Sad eyes follow me, but I still believe there's something left for me. So please come stay with me, because I still believe there's something left for you and me, for you and me, for you and me." These lyrics certainly feel a lot more hopeful than the rest of the song, with Stapp sort of relating this mantra of having something left for you and me. In essence, there's something worth living for, and I think this is what this major chord is supposed to represent, this sort of great life force or some sort of internal motivation which carries us through those dark moments in our lives. And interestingly enough, all the lines sort of end on the word me, right? It's very individual. It's you're relating to it, right? It's all on me, you know, sad eyes follow me, which is a very notable way to have a chorus. And you don't really notice it that it all rhymes with me at all though. And a small interesting note here is that the bass is playing along with some of Stapp's singing lines here rather than simply playing the root notes. It's a small but very powerful choice as it really gives that extra power to some of the lines which it doubles. Then, just with Scott Stapp saying that mantra, everything cuts out. All we are left with is the chorus clean guitar again, complete with that out-of-key F-sharp major, along with that violin melody we heard earlier as well. This is a really cool full circle moment in the song, going from, you know, the huge, high, intense energy in the bridge and sort of taking that all back away, back to a lone voice and clean guitar, right? That sort of violin, that weird unresolved violin melody really kind of takes us back, right? It's that lifeline that carried him through that first verse in his dark times, right? And it's just a really, really great use of dynamics here. And before the final chorus, Scott Stapp's voice echoes out into the darkness, repeating that famous line, right? "Hold me now, I'm 6 feet from the edge, and I'm thinking." The band then hits that second climax of the song and that huge chorus once again, hitting another huge emotional high. This double climax, I think, is another reason why this song is so popular. You know, you get to cry during the first chorus and then scream your heart out and let off a whole bunch of steam and stress on the following two. Just great stuff, man. Like, what can you say? As the chorus ends, this time without the repeat in the second chorus, we again see the reappearance of that intro clean guitar, the violin, and Stapp's voice. He only sings the first 2 lines of the song, and the guitar and violin both sort of just end and fade out into oblivion, into the darkness. And to me, this is the band sort of restarting the song for you and telling us this emotional journey is far from over. It sort of encourages you to rewind the song, to listen to it again, right? You hear the first opening lines, well, I might as well just listen to it again. It's a very cool touch. I like it. It's a nice way to end it. And it sort of ends not with a bang, but sort of like a whimper, you know?
All I think is safe.
And worthy of note here too is the subtle background strings that are held after the song ends takes us directly into My Sacrifice if you're listening to the songs on the album back to back. But My Sacrifice will have to wait for another day for a deep dive. And so all in all, One Last Breath tells a story that pretty much all of us are feeling right now. Chronic stress and being on the verge of a breakdown, pleading to the universe for some sort of salvation, and the cathartic release of all this tension, stress, and hopelessness, which is then all packaged into a very short and sweet and well-written 3-minute and 50-second song, which is easily digestible. Not only that, but the crazy happenstance of this sort of shared cultural moment in which basically everyone who was alive during the noughties is familiar with Creed, or at least Creed's sound. This creates this incredibly powerful nostalgia effect, and even affects people like me who were very young when this song came out. To put this in perspective, the song is 23 years old, which means that this song is as old to us now as Queen's We Are the Champions was in 2001. Now, adding to the insane popularity, as well as the nostalgia factor, is the insane memeability of the song. There are so many quotable moments, and that main hook of Hold Me Now, I'm 6 feet from the edge can fit into so many different circumstances and settings, and to be completely honest with you, is probably a line that nearly everybody alive today can relate to in some way or another. And the song is just very, very well written. It's not just so musically simple that it's not interesting. It just gives just enough flavor to really tie it all together and keep it melodically interesting as well. Which gets to the crux of my argument here. Creed somehow tapped into something very, very deep into the psyche of Western peoples here. The song not only evokes the feeling of paradise lost and all the great times that we used to have as a society when it was in its golden age, which I think is pretty much inarguably, right, the early 2000s, but it also taps into this underlying desperation that seems to underpin nearly everything these days. And not only does it do all this, it does so in a very authentic and almost innocent way. We 100% believe the words that are coming out of Stapp's mouth, and we feel every syllable deep into our spiritual core. Now take all of that and put in Mark Tremonti's absolutely masterful musicianship, and we have the complete recipe for a complete masterpiece of music. Bravo, Creed. You guys truly did something very remarkable with this song, and judging by some of the comments on a lot of the YouTube videos, I think you've saved a ton of lives with this song as well. So, comment down below your favorite memories of the song. What feelings does it bring to you? You know, I'm always curious to hear what you guys have to say. Remember to like, subscribe, and consider supporting me with a channel membership. We've got lots more to come. I've been Varvis. Cheers.